Episode 11 of ReZero Season 4 is not just the best invention since sliced bread, it is the literal greatest thing humanity has ever produced since our ancestors managed to control fire. In my opinion, this episode was directed perfectly from start to finish. Each sequence of events led to a direct development, and not a single moment felt empty. Reed somehow left the second floor's exam room, then proceeded to frame mug the entire extended family of the centaur that almost killed Ram and Subaru. Echidna managed for the third time to give a 50% discount offer on herself. Truly a great merchant. And Emilia finally got her very own Rem moment with Subaru, minus the friend zoning. When the new renditions of Styx Helix and Stay Alive played towards the end, I knew that I had just finished watching absolute cinema. We are really lucky to have such a great production team at Studio White Fox, who clearly love and care about the story they are working on, including Myth and Royd, who are massive fans of the series, which is why they continue to make iconic music for it. There are several factors which contribute to how good the ending of Season 4's first core was, and one of the major ones is the simple fact that the episode was full of intentional callbacks to Subaru's growth journey from Season 1 to serve as setup for the eventual reignition of his resolve. And I'm not just talking about the episode title of Re-Life Starts in Another World from Zero being a direct callback to the title of Season 1's episode 18, From Zero, which is of course due to the parallels between the roles of Emilia and Ram respectively, but we can actually start by looking at the opening scene itself. So Ram catches Subaru lacking in the room where he hid Meili's body, and when the voices in his head convince him to murder her, he gets RKO'd out of nowhere by an ice cage, revealing that Emilia was in on it with Ram after noticing how Subaru was acting strangely ever since they found him unconscious in the Book of the Dead library. Right there, Ram decides to torture Subaru in order to extract information out of him regarding what's going on. After all, given the fact that he may have indeed killed Meili, she couldn't even trust that he was the real Subaru anyway. This scene is a callback to how Ram and Rem decided to torture Subaru during their initial meeting with him due to how suspicious he acted in addition to the witch's stench on him, leading them to believe he was a member of the witch cult. Luckily though, Emilia was around this time to prevent Ram from potentially killing Subaru, which, if it had happened, might have stifled his eventual development that we see later in the episode. Beyond this, Subaru is taken over by whatever entity is possessing him. I'm just gonna pretend to be clueless on who it is for now, only to wake up and find the entire tower in shambles with Reed Estrella somehow out of the second floor that he was supposedly incapable of leaving. The two then meet Julius fighting a bunch of hunger centaurs before Reed dispatches all of them and challenges Julius to a fight, at which point Julius entrusts the safety of Lady Anastasia, who is herself possessed by an echidna spirit, to Subaru. Subaru then finds Beatrice and Echidna before they get ambushed by Definitely Not Shaula, ultimately resulting in the latter two's deaths through the detonation of Definitely Not Shaula's severed pincer. This series of devastating incidents understandably leaves Subaru broken, physically, mentally, and even spiritually. As you can see in this scene with Beatrice and Echidna when he kneels down and starts begging God for forgiveness for whatever it was he did wrong, since in his confusion that was the only hope left for him to escape this hell he was thrown into and return to his parents. Instead of God, however, Subaru is found by the devil of the world, the Witch of Envy, Satella, who showers him with her seemingly infinite love, and this is where the genius of ReZero's writing manifests. You see, for someone like Subaru, Satella's love, though overwhelming and abundant, is the exact opposite of what he needed in that moment, and there is a very good reason for this. Keep in mind that Subaru right here had lost his memories of everything that happened prior to episode 8 of season 4, meaning that he is, for all intents and purposes, a blank slate, just like how he was during his first arrival in Lagunica. Thus, from his own perspective, Natsuki Subaru is that once brilliant and sociable kid who, over the years, slowly lost his sense of self-worth, confidence, and motivation, leaving him with with no friends or desire to do anything at all, as he fell into indecisiveness, procrastination, and ultimately stagnation. With no pathway for higher education or work in sight, he had become what society deems to be a shut-in loser, a phenomenon in Japan known as hikikomori. And worst of all, Subaru was perfectly aware of his pathetic state of affairs, yet he felt too far gone to do anything about it, while simultaneously beating himself up for having become a burden on the only two people left who still loved and cared about him, his mother and father. So much so that he convinced himself to be a disappointment to his parents, a mindset which further contributed to his demoralization. Knowing this, notice what Satella does to comfort Subaru. She hugs him, then wraps him inside a shell to shield him from the collapsing tower, and incessantly repeats how much she loves him like a broken record. Needless to say, Satella's approach is a metaphor for Subaru's stagnation. In this moment, she behaves akin to a caricature of an overprotective mother who wants to shield her infant from the dangers of the outside world. And so, she shelters him from the collapsing tower, shelters him from having to deal with the reality of what's going on around him. Much like how Subaru chose to shelter himself from the adversities of life by opting to become a shut-in who does nothing other than play video games in his room all day. Certainly the easier path to take, yet it is one mired with regret in the long run. It is no coincidence that sloth was the very first sin that Subaru had to overcome in the ReZero story. This is why I always say that Tappei Nagatsuki is a genius. His writing is highly multi-layered and interconnected. Notice how, as everything was falling apart and everyone was dying, the first Sword Saint, Reed, remained entirely unfazed. If anything, it looked like he was having fun, a stark juxtaposition to the confused and panicking young man right next to him. Obviously, Reed is far too powerful for any calamity to pose a threat to him. And even if such a thing were to exist, he had no fear of dying in battle. In the end, he would mercilessly destroy any who stood in his way. This is when Reed would express a deceptively fitting proposition to Subaru as he was lamenting their state of affairs. Those who cannot accomplish anything will waste their time complaining about the unfairness of the world around them rather than dealing with their own inadequacies. As such, the weak become experts at making excuses for why they fail. Such a statement may sound rich coming from one like Reed, who was born with both strength and talent beyond compare. Especially from the perspective of Natsuki Subaru, who was nothing more than a perfectly ordinary fellow with no great feats to his name. However, be careful not to miss the core idea here, since failure in itself is not what destroys a person's life. Rather, it is wallowing in despair and succumbing to weakness where one's time goes to die. Even if some part of Subaru wanted the comfort of being sheltered from adversity, that is definitely not what he needed. And the contrast is brilliantly depicted when Emilia shows up to break him free from Satella's shell, which symbolizes her breaking him from his self-imposed dejection and snapping him back to reality. If you ask me, one of the core themes of ReZero is how strong character is built through suffering, which in a way is a profound declaration against surrendering to nihilism. Though it is obviously undesirable, Natsuki Subaru's character portrays how suffering forges strong men. So, in a way, it is good to suffer, not because of the state itself, but because of the potential to overcome that which you may have once deemed unsurmountable. Initially, Natsuki Subaru gave up on trying to compete in anything or accomplish any goal, choosing the path of least resistance rather than solving his problems. Until he met Emilia in the capital of Lagunica, where he finally decided to do something for someone else. This was ultimately for Subaru's own benefit, as it taught him that what he needed wasn't the safety of comfort, but the ability to challenge adversity head-on so that he need not hide behind any comfort. And we can all attest to just how much adversity he has challenged so far. The difference between Satella and Emilia's approaches in this context can be summarized as the difference between niceness and kindness. The Witch of Envy shielding Subaru from the disaster taking place while repeating the phrase, "I love you," is perhaps nice, but such an act would lead him nowhere. Kindness, in this case, is Emilia. She breaks him free of the shell which he symbolically put himself in, then offers him her hand to stand back up and face reality. To climb through the river Styx and to stay alive until you triumph over Hades, you're gonna have to start somewhere. Sometimes you will have a helping hand, other times you won't, but the principle stays the same. Such is the essence of the beautiful exchange between Subaru and Emilia at the end of episode 11. And by the way, the final part where Emilia reintroduces herself then asks for Subaru's name is a direct callback to their initial meeting in season 1, but reversed, with Emilia this time introducing herself first. At this point, Subaru has yet to regain his memories, but it's very obvious how, after listening to Emilia's retelling of his journey since they met, he decided to stand by her side once again and become the hero his friends need. What happens immediately after, with Subaru jumping down to grab Emilia as they fall into the abyss of memories, is an action that I interpret as him regaining his treasured purpose, which ignited his ambition to begin with. Then he wakes up once again at the Healing Spirit's room with Emilia and Beatrice. Alas, Natsuki Subaru is back, still missing his memories, but with them or without them, he will certainly find a way to succeed, no matter how many times it takes. Anyway, this episode was a fucking masterpiece. I rate it a whole shaula out of 10, which is the highest possible rating I could give to anything. I am really looking forward to seeing the insane feats Reed Astrea will do in Core 2, but we still got some time until then. So as always, thank you all for watching. For now, I've been My Name for Now, and I will catch you in the next one. Take care.